Whether you're looking to land your next promotion, make a career transition, or find the next best role for you, being a job candidate can be challenging.
And even sometimes isolating, but you don't have to do it alone.
I'm Karen Weeks, the CEO and Chief Career Coach of Shine at Work Coaching. I bring over 20 years of HR experience to the conversation, including as the Chief People Officer at Order Groove.
And I'm Dan Carr, a Shine at Work career coach with over a decade of recruiting experience, helping high-growth startups expand with top talent.
On this podcast, we will shine a light on your job search so you can land a role that lets you flex your strengths and progress your career in an environment you actually look forward to working in each day.
From creating a standout resume, to confidently negotiating your salary, to find your footing as a new manager, you can expect to hear actionable advice to help you shine your brightest in your role.
This is the Shine at Work podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Shine at Work podcast. For those who listen normally week to week, you may have noticed we took a little break. Some of that was intentional. We took a little time off, which everybody needs, and I always encourage people to do. Some of it was a little unplanned. I won't go into all the details just to spare you the drama. But July 4th night, we had a little incident. I ended up in the ER with a concussion. All is fine. Can still see a little bit of a bruise if you can see that close. But I'll tell you something, that really sets the tone for this conversation around knowing what you want in your career and how that overlaps with your life. Because man, does that remind you of some things pretty quickly when you can't be online, you're on bed rest, you can't look at your phone, can't even text your best friend about like, hey, I'm still alive. So Dan, how have your last few weeks been while I was gallivanting?
You have me concerned, so it's been a little anxiety packed. But no, it's summer. It's really hot and rainy here in the city, so haven't been able to be outside and about as much as I'd love, but it's been nice to unplug a little bit. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I feel like our cities are flipped. So down in Charlotte, it's been hot, but definitely not what it usually is. And not the humidity has not been as bad this summer. But I feel like up in New York, y'all are getting it way worse.
It's been rough, but nothing too fresh air conditioners can't solve. So
It's all about the AC.
exactly.
Well, as we dive into today's topic, we have been hearing a lot from our current clients as well as some prospects that we're talking to during discovery calls about what I actually want to do in my career. And so I think there's this wave of, I don't know if it's the summer, I don't know if it's just time in people's lives, I don't know if it's still sort of like some of the post-COVID feels and emotions, but I think like our last 4 discovery calls have all been around, I want to be more intentional. I want to figure out what I actually want to do versus just going from job to job.
Yep, which is even common, in having recruited for a decade plus. I'm always ending a conversation with a potential candidate for my company of like why you want to make a move, and that's always been a pretty big motivating factor of like I need a change for a myriad of reasons, but it's just a common consistent thread that we see in all these types of conversations, and something I think we can have a good conversation about today.
Yeah. And I know I've been in those moments where if I felt stuck, sometimes I looked externally and I'd go through some interviews and I'd go, actually, I think I have it pretty good. Maybe I'm just feeling a little deflated or disengaged or burned out, or I don't know what opportunities are at my current company. So I just need to have that conversation with my manager, but I actually don't want to leave. At other times, I was really focused on excelling my career or accelerating my career or doing something like that. So like I did need to make a move in order to do that. So you could stay, you can go, you can have a bunch of options, but you have to kind of figure out what you want in order to then make that decision of, do I start having conversations with recruiters?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that just goes into, a little bit of self-reflection of when you start to feel like maybe burned out, or you're losing a little bit of motivation in the role, or the sparks just not there anymore. It starts to pop up in all sorts of different little ways. And I think the important thing is recognizing that. I think people will first reaction will to feel guilty about it. But I think much like anything, it's really just doing a little bit of self-reflection and start to ask yourself, why am I feeling this way?
Yeah.
And digging through some of the different areas that might be impacting that, and then figuring out, what do you need to solve for this?
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a really great point about the guilt piece because some of the folks that we are working with have been with their companies for 5, 7, even 8 and 9 years. And so they
Hmm.
say, they've taken such good care of me. I've grown a lot here. I feel bad about even thinking about leaving. But I think it goes back to that reflection of the why. Like, what is making you feel this way? Or when did you start feeling this way? Because then you can figure out, is it something that's changed in your life? Like you may want more flexibility, or I don't know, like you just bought a house and you may need more money or more stability, or there are things that change outside of your career that can impact how you're feeling about your job in the moment.
I can speak from personal experience. I've gone through that a couple different times where I've been with companies that I was super passionate about what I was doing, what the opportunity was, and just lost steam somewhere along the way, not really understanding why. And it really just took some sitting back, thinking through it, and realizing like opportunities change too.
Yeah.
So the company that you work for, like, yes, you may feel some loyalty to the company and to the product or to your team, but these things all naturally change. Maybe the direction of the company has changed a little bit. Maybe the culture of the company has shifted. I've worked a lot in startups where that's just natural. You
Hmm.
what the company is at 50 people is not the same thing at 200 people. And for me personally, it's what I've always sort of come back to is like, okay, this was an opportunity to build something.
Yeah.
I kind of did that, and now it's kind of running itself. And maybe I need to look at jumping into a new opportunity where I can get back to what I'm passionate about, and it's just reconnecting with like what my intentions were and why I got into the role originally,
Yeah.
and sort of understanding what's there, what's not there. Can I still find that internally, or is it time to move on?
Yeah, and that's a really great point around it doesn't mean something bad has happened at the company. Like
Yep.
growth is good. Like you want
Yep.
your company to grow. But we talk about this in change management and manager workshops that we do is that, the people who got you here may or may not be the people that keep going with you. And that's
Hmm.
okay. And so now reflect that back on yourself. Like if you're a builder, if your company, yay, has grown to hundreds or thousands of people. So you're sort of more in maintenance mode. If that's not where you like to be, awesome. You're so proud of that journey. Go do it again with another company. And that's okay.
Yeah, and just from my experience in talking to a lot of people that are looking to make the transition, whether that's coaching or that's being an internal recruiter and understanding their motivations, um, you change as a person. So
Yeah.
you were mentioning maybe sort of gaining traction and getting a bigger salary and getting raises has been really important and something that you're chasing. Maybe titles and getting sort of climbing up the ladder and getting to a higher level in your experience is more important to you. But I find a lot of people will get, and it's generally that like 7, 10 years of your
Hmm.
experience where it's like, okay, I've been chasing this carrot, but now I'm realizing what's really important to me is the work that I'm actually doing. Or a really common one is, what does the company stand for? What is the impact they're making out there in the world? And like, what is my work feeding every single day? And it's just maybe you're changing a little bit as a person. Your focus is changing. The things that were important aren't as important now. And that's completely normal too. And that's actually a fun time in your career to like
Yeah.
take a step back and be like, okay, what would I really enjoy doing? Where do I want to put my blood, sweat, and tears as far as a product or a mission of a company, and work backwards from there.
Yeah, it's sort of the sweet spot of when we like to work with folks is when they have enough years of experience under their belt that they have some of those takeaways. They have some of
Hmm.
that pattern recognition. They're able to say like, "Oh, this worked for me. This didn't work for me." And actually, two people we just started working with, you said something similar around. I just kind of kept falling into jobs, which by the way is
Hmm.
awesome. And for those of you who listen to this and are working your ass off to get a job, I know that sounds obnoxious, but they'd follow someone or someone would reach out to them and they're like, yeah, that sounds cool. So they got a new job without ever sort of doing that purposeful? Am I being intentional with these things? I'm just taking the opportunities.
Yep.
Nothing is right or wrong, but that's another moment of like, oh, maybe I need to poke my head up and figure out, is this the path I want to keep going down? Because it just kind of happened.
Yeah. And that could just be a byproduct of being really good at nurturing your network. I think,
Mhm.
we've talked about it before on the podcast of like, when is the last time you actually put together a
Yeah.
resume and just started sending it out there versus sort of leaning into your network of people and things sort of coming to you? And it's very easy to just be like, okay, yeah, I am feeling like it may be time for to make a move. Like, let me go have a conversation, and all of a sudden you're you're in a new role in a new
Yeah.
company, and it wasn't something that made a pros and cons list
Yeah.
about and were super intentional, and that can add up pretty quickly. So it's very normal, but like taking that pause at some point in your career and questioning that is also normal.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so step one is why you might feel stuck or sort of what's happening for you in this moment. Then you want to sort of figure out, okay, I know why it's happening. So what do I actually want? And this is where I warned you that I was going to bring up a Spice Girl song because you have to figure out what you want, what you really, really want. And you're welcome. So, and that's now in everybody's heads, and I've done my job. So, you know how you feel today. What do you want moving forward? And I think one thing that people sometimes naturally go to is, well, this is what I'm good at, which is awesome. Like, definitely want to lean into your strengths. The follow up question I always ask is, but is that the thing you want to be doing?
Mhm.
So, I may be really good at project plans, but I actually don't love doing them anymore. I want to sort of think more holistically and someone else give me the to dos from it,
Mhm.
but that's a skill I have, but I may not love it anymore. So, how do people sort of piece these things together around this is what I want, but this is also what I'm good at?
The first thing, and I think a lot of people go into this situation, and to your sort of statement of like, this is what I'm good at, and they don't give themselves credit that they can transition sort of the
Mm,
fundamental skills. Like, people do it all the time. We work with people that want to make a transition into something new, and you sort of have to find the connective tissue between what you have done, and what you want to do in the future, and what's really going to be rewarding for you. um, but I think the first step is just knowing that is possible, and it happens all the time. There is a point of being realistic with yourself too, of like, okay, if I'm super passionate about this, am I willing to take one step backwards
mm,
in order to make that transition? And am I passionate enough where I know that you can make up ground once you sort of get into the right career set? But those are two pretty important areas to like
yeah.
focus on. Like, you can make it happen. How much do you want to make it happen, and how motivated are you?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Several years ago, I was the HR partner for a department, and someone who is a manager of one team came to me and said, I really want to move over to this other team. I know I've never done it before, so I know I have to start off as an individual contributor. What roles are open? Let's talk about it. And she was great. So we definitely wanted to support her. This is probably an extreme example, but she took a significant salary cut to do it because she had to
Mhm.
go, quote unquote, back to the beginning to literally build those skills. But for her, she had the flexibility financially to do it. And it was important enough for her to make that change because she just knew she didn't want to keep going in the leadership change she was in. And she then became a manager of that team and took that forward and like built an amazing career off of it. But she had the professional maturity to say, I know I need to learn this and build credibility there. So even though I'm at this level now, I'm not that level over there. Help me
Yep.
figure out how to do that.
Yeah, yeah. I had a similar, like, one that stands out to me is somebody that I hired in my recent past, made a career shift, had went and got their MBA, which they poured a lot of money into, but they were passionate about. They wanted to make a shift in their career, so they didn't. Especially going back to school, like, they didn't have recent relevant experience, so they came in as a very entry level sort of project manager
Mhm.
position, but they were so passionate and so focused of like what they needed to do, being realistic about having to take a step back and having to learn, create an action plan around that. And that
Mm.
person became a director in a 2-year period.
Wow.
So it was a small startup, but he grew with the company,
Yes.
and was able to really just have hyper focus and get to where he wanted to be in a very quick amount of time.
Yeah. Well, and I like what you said about the action plan, because I think another thing is as you're figuring out where your strengths are, how that overlaps with what you like to do, if there are other things you like to do or want to do that you don't have the experience with or aren't a strength, as you're figuring this out, you can start to dip your toe in a little bit and take a real easy online class or,
Mhm.
kind of just have fun on your own, like download Excel and just play around in Excel and learn how to do VLOOKUPs and all the things if that's something you want to learn. So it's an opportunity to start to feel like you're gaining traction or exploring different things without having to make the whole leap of, oh, so clearly I'm going to change jobs and companies and uproot everything I've done.
Yeah, but I think you brought up a really good point that's maybe worth expanding on in your story. Like someone internally wanted to make a shift
Mhm.
and they just started having conversations internally
Yeah.
because, companies really value, for the most part, the people that they have and they want to retain those people. And if they want to make a shift in their career, good managers, good people teams will have things in place to begin to have those conversations, build out an action plan of how someone can make a shift internally. So it doesn't always need to be, okay, I need to jump ship. I need to figure out an entirely different plan. You can sort of look inwards in some circumstances, and utilize the resources that you have in a company and maybe get at least your first step in the right direction. And then maybe like that's afforded you a year in a new focus area, and then you're moving on to a new opportunity. But there certainly is the opportunity, to at least explore the resources internally, and that can even start with if you have a good relationship with your manager of being where it's open, honest, and transparent of sort of sharing what you're feeling and starting to talk through how you might be able to get there internally.
Yeah, it's so important to recognize. Again, it kind of goes back to that why, because if you love your company, if you love a lot of things about it, but the role doesn't feel right anymore, then are there other opportunities in an organization? And if it is a big transition for you, your current company is the way to do it because they're more willing to take a quote unquote risk because they already know you're a good team member. You know the company, you know the clients. I've seen this several times, including at Order Groove, where we have taken a chance on someone because we really liked them. They knew they didn't want to be in that role anymore. Well, let's try over here. We had the business need, so we filled the role with someone internally. We
Yep.
can teach you how to do project management, but you know our space, you know our clients, you know the everything. I'll teach you project management. The other stuff is way more valuable than the project management skills.
Yep, absolutely. And they don't have to go through letting someone go through the hiring process. If that doesn't work out, then that it's a very expensive process for them to go
Yes.
through and find an external candidate for something they might be able to move around, internally. So certainly a great option to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've very seamlessly moved into sort of step 3 of what we do, when people come to us saying, "Not I don't know what to do next," is so you figure out your why, you figure out your want or what you need next, and then you figure out, so where can I start to get that? Internally is absolutely one thing to consider, again, assuming it's not like toxic or like that's the thing that you need to get away from. But then, and we've said this a million times, but just to pitch it again, start talking to people who do the things that you're thinking about, whether that's, you like what you do, but you just want a different company, or you want a bigger company and you think that's going to offer like more 9 to 5. Go talk to someone who works there or find someone who works in companies like that and say, I come from a startup. I feel like I'm working all the time. If I worked for this huge, big company, is it really 9 to 5 like I think it's going to be? They'll tell you if that's how it works or not.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, network, network, network.
Yeah.
I think one of the an easy thing that we talked about earlier, in some of our earlier episodes is leaning into your alumni network.
Mhm.
And you don't even need to be connected with someone, but having that alumni connection, people are generally open to having like a quick informational call.
Yeah.
So if you're going through this process and it's like, okay, I think I'd really like to, work in this specific profession, or like, here's some missions and products of companies that I'm really connected to. Look on LinkedIn, see if there's anybody that went to your school that's there, and say, hey, I'm sort of pondering a transition. I'm really excited about either what you do or what your company does. Wonder if you had like 10, 15 minutes to chat with me little bit about your experience. And that happens all the time and can even lead to like, yeah, in fact, I know we're hiring for an entry level position. I could refer you. But certainly leaning into your network is a great first step to get that unbridled conversation or realistic conversation about what you might be walking into, really to paint the picture for you of what you think you might be looking for versus what the reality is.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's so important that that's why you have to know the why first, because
Hmm.
then when you have those conversations, you can be looking for very specific things. So, one person we're working with knows that she wants to get back into a more creative space. Well, that can mean a million of things. So, we
Yeah.
talked to her about what does that mean to you? She defined it and we sort of figured it out. So now when she talks to people, she can say, instead of using the word creative, which can mean so many different things, she can ask more specific questions or she can target specific roles that she's considering and how that overlaps with her creativity. But she had to kind of do that work first. Otherwise,
Hmm.
it would have been like almost too broad.
It's so important to really like we were saying in the beginning, take that step back and do a little bit of soul searching of like what's the issue here, what's going to solve for this issue for me, um, and then start talking to people about like what that path might look like.
Yeah, and often we'll come up with like 3 different paths. One path is to
Yep.
stay and figure out how to make it work in your current company. One path might be similar, but like adjacent to what you do, and another path might be something totally different. And honestly, that's where talking to others can help. Yes, we'd love to help you figure it out. But whether that's a friend, a roommate, a parent, a partner, like whatever, one person that we were working with really was like, the sky's the limit. I'm interested in so many things, which was awesome, but it was almost too much. And so we
Hmm.
had to narrow it down a little bit. And then she ended up finding this great opportunity through a company that we introduced her to, but it was something she hadn't really thought of before. She just knew she liked this idea of like helping people find different and interesting products to consider. She's big on social media, like as an individual, and we happened to know an influencer marketing company. And we said, well, have you ever thought about that? Like, I could make an introduction. And like 4 introductions later, and like 6 months later, she ended up working there. But a lot of it was because she didn't know how that all pieced together yet. And it was talking it
Hmm.
through us and us knowing different kinds of companies that it kind of all started to piece together for her.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably a pretty consistent way that we move forward with people is like casting the net fairly wide in the beginning and then really leaning into, okay, here's a structure and a plan moving forward of like how we're going to have some conversations and how you're going to be able to tap into some networks and just tap into info and realistic conversations so you can sort of make that net a little smaller and hone in on what might be the reality of what you're really interested in. So,
Yeah, because it kind of goes back to what we were saying in the beginning. Everything overlaps. And so if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling not even disengaged, but just kind of like, about about your career, it will
mhm,
impact other areas of your life. So if you're sort of trying to figure out what you want to do next, or like what you want to be when you grow up, or like what your career path should be, or whatever phrasing you're using, if you kind of take a moment to figure out, why am I feeling this way? When did it change? What would need to be different in the future? What do I want next? How does that interact with the rest of my life? And then how do I actually go about figuring that out? That will unlock a lot of things for you.
yeah,
Um, so we always do a peek behind the curtain these days. I have my peek behind the curtain. Do you want to go first this week or do you want me to?
you go.
All right. So you actually teased it earlier. I don't know if you know you did that, but it's use your HR partner, use your manager. So I can't tell you the number of conversations I've had as an internal HR partner with people. And when I start to kind of hear some of these words or some of this spidey sense around, I don't know if, what I'm trying to do or try to think about their career paths. I'm like, so let's think about it. Like, let's be honest. I want you to be happy because if you're not happy, you're not going to be the best employee. So, how can I help you figure that out? And I realize not every HR team is set up that way. I realize you have to have trust with your manager in order to have those conversations. But if you have those relationships with your HR partner, with a mentor, with your manager, start there and just say like, I don't know if I want to become a senior, blah, blah, blah. Or I don't know. I've been thinking more about like where I want to be in a year. Like you can kind of pad it so it doesn't, if you're anxious about making it sound like you're trying to resign in that moment, but you'd be amazed at the conversations you can have and the advice and the insights and the networking that those people closest to you can help you with, especially if you hand it in a very professional, I'm just trying to think kind of conversation. So don't be afraid of those conversations with your HR partner or your manager.
Okay, once again, you have stolen my look behind the curtain.
But I'm the HR person that gets to be mine.
Yeah, but so I mean, just expanding on that, I would say, and this is tough, but generally when you are having one-on-ones with your manager on a consistent basis, like a percentage of that time should always be committed to sort of career development,
Yes.
like where you're going, how do you feel about sort of your path forward, and just challenge your manager if that's not the case. And again, this is tough because it's every manager is a little bit different. Some of you feel like you can be more transparent, but that should be the structure in any good sort of manager mentor sort of relationship. So seeing if you can sneak in, like if it's not happening, you know once a month, do you mind if we kind of check in on even these are goals we set in the beginning of the year, sort of where I'm at, and then talk a little bit about where I want to be going as well, and see if you can sneak that. So that's just sort of
Yeah.
2 cents or an amendment to what you're saying. But I think the other thing that we've seen, and which is very natural, don't feel guilty about where you are. You're working in a job, you're starting to lose a little bit of steam, the passion's not there. Everyone makes a career, or not makes a change in their career at some point, and they grow through these motions of maybe not being their peak performer that they were originally. And just give yourself a little bit of breathing room. It's very natural. It happens to everyone. And just utilize, when you do recognize that, just sort of capitalize on it and start asking yourself the questions that we've been going through, but try and stay away from the guilty feelings, because it's extremely natural, happens to everyone, and it's just par for the course.
Yeah. Well, and you're going to feel so much better when you have figured it out. And again, figuring it out might be, I just needed to talk to my manager about this one part of my job that just actually was bothering me more than I realized. I was able to do something about that and I'm super happy and I never want to leave again. Like,
Yep.
it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to leave the company, but you owe it to yourself and honestly everyone around you at work and at home that if you're feeling stuck or you're not just sort of feeling it right now, take the time to figure it out, because whatever figuring it out ends up looking like, you will feel so much happier and so much energized and all of the things that you want out of your career and your life. So it's worth it. So I'm so glad you brought that out.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I have a client that I'm working with right now that's going through something very similar, and what's making her feel better is having momentum moving forward of the new path. So it's like, okay, I feel a little guilty. I'm not where I was when I first joined this company, but I know I've got momentum of taking that next step into what really makes sense for me. And it's all about sort of going through those initial stages of questioning and then starting to build an action plan around how you might figure that out.
Yeah. And if you are a manager or you are an HR partner, do everything you can to put this into your culture and put these into your one-on-ones and create the space for your employees to have these conversations with you.
So important.
All right, my friend. Well, hopefully I will see you next week and has returned back to normal and we will have another exciting episode for everyone coming up next. But as always, if you're feeling how you're feeling, or if you're feeling sort of how we described in this episode, you're feeling a little stuck or anything that's going on in your career and we can help you, let's keep the conversation going. Reach out to us. Let us know how we can help. And as always, it was so good to see you, my friend.
Great to see you.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Shine at Work podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for the video versions of our episodes. To learn more about how you can work with Dan and I to make your next big career move, go to our website, shineatwork.net, or follow us on Instagram at shine_at_work. See you at the next episode.